Hello, welcome. This is seminar 2 of 4 in a Building a Strong Workforce seminar series. After the introduction to kick off the seminar was introduced, the speaker Patty from Pro-A was introduced, and we had technical issues with the wireless speaker. So there was actually a 2-minute gap where there was no sound in the recording. That has been edited out. But just so you know what you missed, Patty Baranowski was introduced, and she explained the title of today is Developing a Culture Supportive of Recovery, an overview of culture and supporting individuals in recovery in the trades workforce. She then recognized her fellow workers at Pro-A, and it is Pro-A, Pennsylvania Recovery Organizations Alliance. I incorrectly introduced her as Pro-A Works. While they do help the workforce, there's no works in their title. But Patty did introduce her fellow co-workers in Pro-A, Executive Director William Stauffer and Nikki Weir, the team lead Works Project Coordinator. After that, she explained the mission. And the mission of Pro-A is to mobilize, educate, and advocate to eliminate the stigma and discrimination toward those affected by alcohol and other substance use conditions, to ensure hope, health, and justice for individuals, families, and those in recovery. Following that, the last part that was cut out with no sound, Patty explained the objectives to today's education. And they want to define recovery, culture, recovery-orientated workplace culture. And we want to be able to describe why culture is important, practices that support recovery. Again, sorry for the technical issues. Now on to the seminar. Hello, welcome. I am John O'Brien from the Keystone Contractors Association. This is seminar 2 of a 4-part series titled Building a Stronger Workforce. And this is being presented by Pro-A Works. And the January session I thought was awesome, very informative. If you missed it by chance, we got the link, so let me know and I can send it to you. Welcome. This is part 2. This is developing a culture supportive of recovery. And today we are going to be in the hands of Patty Baranowski from Pro-A. She's going to steer the ship today, and I might have butchered her name, but maybe it was close enough.
That's close
and
enough.
I will quiet down here in a second and let Patty steer the ship. So take it away, Patty.
Awesome. Thank you very much, John. Pleasure to be here. You guys are amazing for allowing us to do this. Like John said, so practices that support recovery in our organizations and identifying steps to implement and measure a recovery supportive program. Okay, next one, thank you. Please feel free to interrupt if you have any questions. The one thing I apologize, I forgot to ask, there is did you pop a link in there? Sorry.
The survey.
The survey?
I did not.
That's quite all right. Can you go back to the first? We'll do this the easy way. Sorry about that. There is a QR code on the first screen. Part of the grant is asking us to keep track of information. And one of the things they want us to know is, did this work or didn't it work? Did it help people? Was there anyone that gained any knowledge from this? And so because of that, we have a pre and post test. The pre and post test and any information, who was in this room, I don't know. I might know your names because they say hello. I don't remember who you are. I will, but I won't be able to share that with anyone. The grant gets no information on the individuals here except for the county that you live in and your approximate age. They do an age bracket thing. So in those questions that they ask you on the pre-test, we're going to compare them to the post-test, and obviously we can't if we don't have who you are being the same person, and that's why they ask to put your identifiers at the top, which is not your name, so we don't identify who you are. If you missed it and you need it, we do have the link. I can post it at the end when we're done, and that way you can fill it out. So thank you for that. So what is recovery? There is a working definition of recovery by SAMHSA, and SAMHSA is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. They have been around forever. It is a federal organization, and it's the country's drug and alcohol pretty much administrative office. They have grants. We actually just finished a 5-year workforce grant with SAMHSA, which was phenomenal. They have grants, they have information. If you look on their website, you want to know anything that has to do with substance use, drug and alcohol statistics. You can even find statistics on why we're doing this grant. And one of the reasons why we applied for it is that we found that the number of individuals who have a substance use disorder or consequences from substance use, as well as mental health and suicide attempts, are higher in the trades industry than any other area of work. That startled us. And I have a lot of people in my family that work in the trades industry, and I didn't want to see anybody else go down that road. So what we try to do is at least educate people so they have the knowledge. Doesn't mean that we're here to say you have a problem, doesn't mean that we're here to say there's something should change, but what it means is, for me, the more information I have, like, knowledge is power. It means the more power I have to make healthy decisions. Doesn't mean control, it just means that it allows me to make healthier decisions. So recovery is a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. Now, for people who are in recovery from substance use, some of them were very surprised and say, well, why doesn't it say drugs and alcohol? It doesn't say anything about drugs and alcohol. Because recovery is different for everyone. Their pathways are so different. And when we do the resource one, it talks a lot about the resources out there. For a lot of us will say, well, yeah, I'm in recovery and I don't drink because I'm in AA. Great. That's a pathway to recovery. But for other people, I have family members, loved ones, and many people in this field that have made a decision to not use the substance that was a drug of choice for them, but they may have a drink now and then. That is up to them. There is ever no judgment on our end. Do we want to see people healthy? That's the main goal. Do we want to see people reach their full potential? That's what we want to do. So for people who say, well, do you think I have a drug and alcohol problem? That's not what we're here for. But we are here for educating people. One of the things that I notice is that if you have an environment that supports you, we excel more easily, as you probably know. So the 4 major dimensions that they talk about of recovery, and this is through SAMHSA, their definition, as well as many other people across the United States use the same dimensions. Health, which is overcoming or managing one's disease, as well as living in a physically and emotionally healthy way. So living in a physically way might mean I'm not using substance use anymore, but emotionally healthy, what does that mean? It means hopefully I'm in a healthy environment where I'm living, I'm in a safe housing environment, and I'm supporting not doing the things I was doing before. Excuse me. Home, a stable and safe place to live. Purpose, meaningful daily activities. You guys know that when you wake up in the morning, having that motive, that some kind of goal. What is my why? Which is like, what do I ask people? What's your why? For a lot of us, it's our family, our kids, our grandkids. Could be because I've been through some of these issues. I want to see other people not go through it. I want to see other people get the help they need. We all know people that didn't get help that they need. And one of the things that we've tried to do with these trainings, and so far so good, we're learning that the more education that you give people, the more healthy choices that they make. And in the continuum of, healthy and unhealthy, I don't know if anyone is 100% healthy, but I want to be right there, and I want to see people right there because that's where we excel. That's where we succeed. So having your why is huge. And of course, community. There's an old saying that talks about the opposite of addiction is connection. I don't know if you guys ever heard that. It's kind of true. So I try to think of it as like, here's our life. And I'm using substances, and here's a huge chunk of my life where I'm using. Weekends, I don't know about you, I'll tell a little bit about maybe family, but some loved ones. In the old, like, parents' age, drink after work, drink when you get when you get a raise, drink when you get laid off, drink, that kind of thing. So, well, I don't drink on the weekends. That might mean Thursday afternoon to Monday night. And that's more than half my week. So we have to look at it individually, what works for me and what doesn't. Excuse me. So the community that we talk about is the people that are used with, maybe the people that are unhealthy for me. I have to get to a community, that space in my life that I stopped using, I have to fill it with something healthy. And that for many people could be hobbies, could be connecting better with people at work, could be a lot of different reasons. But the community piece, relationships and social networks that provide support, friendship, love, and hope. Doesn't mean that we have to be in an intimate relationship with someone, but having those relationships, you guys probably recognize, having peers, having bosses, having employees, having people that support what you're doing and being there for you is huge. Thank you. So what do we mean by culture? Well, culture is really part of our environment. That's what we talk about. And a system of shared beliefs, values, behaviors, and customs that is among a specific group. So part of my culture growing up might have been, my family was religious. So we did a church, maybe a service like once a week. That was part of my culture. Could be a lot of other examples of culture, but for this example, culture compromises traditional ideas and related values, and it's a product of actions. It's learned, shared, and transmitted from one generation to the next, and it helps interpret our existence. So maybe part of me and who I am is part of what I grew up with, so those cultures. But the really good news is, if I don't now agree with those ideas, those values, and those traditions, I can make a healthy choice not to do them. For some of us in our families, we were meant to be seen and not heard growing up, right? You were the children growing up, and we didn't deal with, I'm just being honest, we didn't deal a lot with conflict. If something was wrong, you just buried it, you know. You think that was healthy? No, you're right, it wasn't. So it's a way of people that they've learned to respond to life's problems. Again, if I grew up in a household where in the environment, how they dealt with problems was they drank or they used substances, that's maybe part of the culture. I don't know any better. So growing up and recognizing maybe now I'm getting the consequences of those things and realizing that's not how I want to live my life, I get an opportunity not just to change my life, but to change the culture around me. Okay. So culture of recovery. The core characteristics, and these are pretty common sense, I think, to most people, but sometimes we don't think about it. Empowering. The culture of recovery really means that I'm not going to do for you, I'm going to help you to get where you need to be. Like when we talked about that enabling, which was probably last week a little bit, and one more in the next session. We talked about enabling. I don't want to do things for people that they can do for themselves and should be doing for themselves. That empowering is, I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm going to show you the resources, but you're going to do it. So it's kind of empowering to say, listen, I trust that you can do this. So being in an environment where I know people are supportive of me and say, you know what, I know that you're able to do that, Patty, I support you. All of a sudden I feel like, okay, I can do this. The nurturing hope and resilience. That's a tough thing. You guys have a tough job, and your employees have a really tough job. Physical labor, right? I think you went over probably a lot of this last week, the physical labor. The quickness, you have to make decisions sometimes really quickly. You also have to depend on each other. And that's why I think it's so crucial to have a supportive recovery at work, because as we're a team, right? Those kind of things, we have to really support each other. And if we notice that there's an issue, maybe you can bring something up. Maybe you can feel comfortable talking to someone. And that's our hope. So supportive and non-stigmatizing. Growing up, because I'm a lot older than some of you, one of the things that I recognized that, you know, the guys worked hard, they came home and they did what they needed to do, and there was no talking about feelings. And so that was really hard, because a lot of people in my family who did have issues with substance use suddenly weren't able to talk about it, and they had nowhere to go. It's not like that anymore. What we're hoping is people recognize that this is a supportive environment and there is no judgment. There's never judgment. If somebody comes to me and say, listen, I think I have a problem. Wow, how brave of you to be able to step up and say that, you know? Not years ago, that's not how people would respond, you know? And feeling part of. We all need to feel part of, no matter whether it's our church, it's our job, it's our family. We talk about having children and grandchildren and all of those. We have to feel part of. And that feeling part of at work is crucial. How many hours a day, a week do you spend at work, right? Sometimes more time than you do with your loved ones. And so that's why this is so important. shared beliefs that shape our recovery culture. So we want to be supportive of people in recovery, and having the beliefs is really the bottom line and the foundation for that. So we have to let people know that recovery is possible. I don't know, but I'm going to guess that everybody has someone they know that is in recovery or has recovered, if that's the way they're describing it, from a substance use. That's huge. People need to know that. And actually, recovery is not only possible, it's probable if people can get the right help. Some people have heard that before. They're shaking their heads. Substance use disorder and mental health disorders are treatable. Years ago, we didn't talk about that. We didn't talk about mental health. We didn't talk about depression. We didn't talk about anxiety. And nowadays, hopefully, people are recognizing that your work environment is probably the place where you need to share that the most. That would be with a peer. That could be with your supervisor. That could be with, a foreman, a business agent, whoever it is that you share it with. The more that we're involved in this grant, the more I see that there are already steps in place out there for people, which is awesome. So your EAPs, your member services, those kind of things, they're there. Do people know they're there? We hope they do. And that's why we're talking about it a little bit more. You guys have member services, I'm guessing, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So supportive management matters. Having a manager that I can go to and say, I'm having some issues. And they say, fine, but just they'll be late for work, or that's fine, but you can't have any time off. Those kind of things kind of would probably set me back a little bit. Might say, well, gee, maybe I shouldn't talk about this anymore. Maybe I should just keep my mouth shut, And that's a really difficult thing for people to be put in the position of their job or their health. Getting help or not, or working. That's a tough one. And that's why the recovery culture should be in place. SUDs and mental health disorders are diseases. And last week, I hope you guys gained something who are in the room. And if not, go online and you can see a lot of knowledge. We're trying to let people know that, in the 50s, the AMA, the American Medical Association, actually decided, looked at all the research, looked at what was, holy mackerel, this is a disease. So it's a disease that is treatable. If I had diabetes, would you judge me because I need to go get some orange juice? Or I hope not, right? It's the same thing we're trying to show people with addiction and mental health. These are diseases, and they can be helped and they can be treated, but judgment is a tough thing. So the stigma one, there'll be a training on stigma, which is pretty important as well, and that's all. It all correlates with this together. So support must be individualized. I've had a handful of conversations with some of the unions and business and employers that say, listen, we have this in place, this in place, this in place. Wonderful. Does everyone have to go through that route? Yes. Okay. The disease of addiction, it is individualized to person. I might not be at the same place someone else is, and vice versa, and same thing with recovery. Maybe I need to have, Friday night is my home group. I really need to go to that. Please don't ask me to work that day. Or I still have a probation officer from what happened when I was drinking, and maybe can you help me so that I can get my PO is going to want to come here. Great. I've heard people say, well, my boss doesn't let probation on the property. That's kind of tough because then when does this probation officer get to see you? So knowing that to support people in recovery and people that are trying to develop that best practice for themselves, and it's individualized. So thank you. Why is it important? So cultural influences are strongly associated with our mental and physical health. You guys believe that, I'm sure? Growing up, living in an environment that maybe wasn't the healthiest, those traditions, those cultures, those things may not have been healthy for me, but I didn't have a choice. I have a choice today. You guys have a choice today. Your employees, your employers, all of you have a choice. And I know that the people in the room are the people that are interested in this, and I love that because that means hopefully you'll gain something from this. Culture can either positively increase or overall mental health, or it can assist in deteriorating it. If I know that people are judging me every day I walk into work because I'm still drinking, that can affect my mental health. I might be nervous, I might be anxious, I might be depressed, I might be worried that they're going to, fire me. Are they going to do a drug test today? Those things affect everything. So if I have a culture that will say, hey, Patty, you have an issue? Come on, let's talk about this. Let's see what we can do for you. That changes everything. And therefore, it changes my mental health and my physical health also. So the negative culture, there's stigma and discrimination. And I'm not going to ask how your experience is, but I am sure that in your lives you have had one situation where somebody was discriminated against because of addiction, and you probably saw a lot of stigma. I think we all have biases, and we'll talk a lot more about that in the next couple of weeks. The things that we can't always change, but if I'm aware that I might have a bias against something, I can change it. If I'm not willing to admit it, it's probably going to stay that way. So open-mindedness is something that we always ask people to do, especially those in the management level. In positive culture, there's support and there's a sense of belonging, and that's tremendous in a recovery environment. The core principles of recovery, supportive workplaces, safety and compliance. So there's clear safety-sensitive rules. And by that, I don't just mean how to run the forklift, who should be on the ladder and how high, using the helmets and the goggles. It doesn't just mean that. It means, are these people under the influence? Is there someone that's under the influence coming in? I had a person I worked with for a long time, and they came in and they said, listen, I work hard. I'm really construction. This is what I do. And this was a few years ago. But still, we go to lunch and we have a couple of beers. And I thought, wow, I know what they do. And I was concerned for safety. Some of that is that safety. Some of that is psychological safety. By psychological safety, I mean, I feel safe enough to be able to talk if I'm having an issue. I feel safe that my peers aren't going to condemn me, if I share that I have an issue. That's that psychological safety. So non-punitive, supportive approaches to help seeking. I'm not going to punish someone if they come to me and they say, listen, I have an issue. There are organizations that have policies in place that help the individuals with substance use. And it might be the first time they bring it up that they have an issue is when they have a urine that they didn't pass. That's fine. But what are we going to do with that? Are we going to make that punitive? It depends on the organization, right? Everybody's got different policies. So access to treatment and recovery supports, your member services, your employee assistance programs, referrals, do we have those in place? We have one, of course, at our organization, and probably the last 3 organizations out of 4 that I worked at had great policies in place, and it was wonderful. And it was 110% confidential. So if I go to my EAP or I go to my supervisor, my executive director, and I say, listen, I need help, he can't share that with anybody. That's not one of those things that even goes through insurance because it's an EAP process, which is great. And people need to know that about confidentiality because they don't always recognize it. They're like, well, I'm not going to them, then they'll judge me, or they're not going to put me on that job anymore. So trying to alleviate some of the fears that people have and the concerns that maybe it won't be confidential is really important also. So anti-stigma leadership and education, language matters. When we do the stigma training, they'll talk about the language we use. If I was to say, I had somebody come to me once and say, yeah, I'm nothing but a dope addict. And I thought, wow, that sounds demeaning. What if you say you're nothing but a person in recovery for a year from a substance use disorder? It changed everything for that person. There's a film called The Anonymous People, and it talks about stigmatizing language and how people feel when they're addressed that way. Now, if you're going into a meeting and you say, hey, I'm so-and-so and I'm an addict, or I'm so-and-so and I'm an alcoholic, that's different. That's that culture. But if I went to my church and I say I'm an addict, how do you think they'd respond, right? So we have to be careful about our language, and we'll talk more about that in stigma. And of course, reintegration and reasonable accommodations. That doesn't mean we can just allow people to be under the influence while they're working, but reasonable accommodations so that people can meet their needs of recovery. I have a helper with the screens, that's why. Policy foundations. So building a supportive, safety-driven, drug-free workplace. How do we do that? I think most organizations today do have policies in place, but every now and then it's a really great idea to review them just to make sure that they're working. So drug-free workplace policy that includes supportive pathways as opposed to punitive. So if somebody is under the influence, or they come to you and they say they have an issue, well, now you can't work for a week. That's kind of tough, right? Because now not only do they have they have the added stress of not having a job, but they have no income to pay their bills. That's a really tough thing. So trying to recognize that we need to support where people are and having pathways that are Could be they go to meetings. It could be they go to outpatient or intensive outpatient. They even have something called a partial program where people do not have to go overnight, so they don't have to stop working. They'd be very busy for quite a little bit, but they would not have to stop working. Clear, consistent processes that support drug-free workplaces tied to job safety needs. So that would mean making sure people are not under the influence, making sure people, let's say you have an individual who has medication-assisted treatment. They're trying to transition, or they have chose to use that pathway for, let's say, an opiate. We want to make sure that they're safe. Number one, that they're being compliant with their medication, and we understand that that's a pathway for them. So understanding that if, depending what's the substance, what's the medication that I'm taking, that could be on a drug test. So looking at and having an open conversation with medication that you're on, is it affecting you? Most people have policies that if you're on a medication that's going to come up positive, they're going to have a conversation with their supervisors. But again, that's up to the organization and their policies. So confidentiality, protections, and informed consent processes. I love to involve people. Like if somebody tells me what to do, I'll be like, you're sure. I'll probably do it because you're my boss, you know. But if my boss says to me, this is what we want to accomplish, how do you think we can do that? All of a sudden I think, wow, okay, they want my input. It's going to change everything. Okay. Hope I'm not losing my voice. The benefits of an EAP are allied trades assistance programs and modern assistance. So EAPs benefit everyone. Increased productivity. When someone is under the influence or someone has a substance use disorder, they often may have decreased productivity that affects not just their area, but the bigger business. The organization could be, could affect the union. It could affect safety, could affect, right, the OSHA. There's guidelines. And when they have an issue, it could affect every part of that organization. So an EAP will help an individual. May not be that they're working for a certain amount of time because they're addressing their needs, but it's going to increase their productivity. Safer workplaces. If I know somebody is not going to be under the influence, I know someone is doing what they need to do for their recovery, it's going to be a safer environment. And like I said, way back then when I've worked with someone, they're like, yeah, everybody comes back, a little bit tipsy. I thought, wow, I haven't heard that lately, which is, thank you, because there's policies in place. I would be concerned what is going to happen after that. It's just a question to ask if that is happening. How is it affecting the safety of the workplace? That's a great question. Lower healthcare costs. I'm not going to need as much healthcare costs if I am being open and honest, and I have an EAP program that's going to help me as well as my coworkers and my supervisors and supervisees. And lower managerial burden. I don't have to continually follow up with someone, continually ask how people are doing, continually find out where they are in their recovery. Once they start this process, you're going to see a difference. Okay. Training supervisors and managers is probably a really important piece. There's a lot of individuals that they've been trained, but the supervisors to recognize the signs, have supportive conversations, and actually make referrals. So there are some supervisors in the field that don't have any of the knowledge, and trying to educate people is one of the pieces we're asking. That's a recovery supportive environment. That's a culture that says, we're here to help you if you have any issues. Use scripted, non-judgmental language and consistent documentation. So if somebody comes to you without the judgment, without the stigma, without discrimination, open-mindedness, and sharing how we can help that person. Educating our supervisors is probably a really important thing for this, because our supervisors are actually the ones that sometimes set the tone. Majority of them that you've worked with are probably amazing, but some you may not have that knowledge, and that's not a judgment. That's about knowing what my education is, knowing what I have been exposed to, knowing what cultures I have worked with in the past. You guys work hard. You've got that mentality. Let's get it done, right? But the real truth is that every one of us is at risk for mental health or substance use. And looking at it that way can help us to say, okay, where are my risks? What can I do to decrease them? And so know when to involve human resources, safety officers or EAP members, services, allied trades assistance program, modern assistance. Those are some of the organizations you have. I'm guessing that each of you knows who the organization is that you go to for an EAP or a member services. Maybe? People online too? Maybe? I hope so. If you don't, find out who it is. Find out what the process is, because even though you may not be a supervisor, and you may, follow up with where would I go from here if somebody came to me? And those pieces are really helpful. So hiring, retention, and recovery-friendly practices. So what we hope people will do is consider hiring individuals who have a recovery experience. Consider hiring friendly practices and remove unnecessary barriers. So your barriers might include somebody doesn't have a vehicle because they lost their license from a DUI, or it could mean that they have a history of a criminal history, and maybe that's going to stop them. A lot of time, the people that I know in the construction industry right now, I've heard many positive things happening. If it has nothing to do with aggression and it's directly related to substance use, they absolutely will sit and look at that. Now, the aggressive part, depending if it's a felony assault, things like that, they might look at and do something different. But every organization is going to be different, whether it be a union, whether it be an organization, a business, they're all going to be different because they have different policies. And unfortunately, I would have to use the policies in my organization. I can't just say, yeah, I won't listen to that policy. I'll hire you, But we can change policies if we don't agree with them, or if they're not working for us anymore. So provide on-ramps, recovery-friendly workplace programs, supportive employment, excuse me, letting people know when they come in the door, hey, whatever we can do to meet your need in that regard, let us know. There should be policies and they should be consistent, but as people come in the door, give them some knowledge and education. Like I said, when we did a training like apprentices, it's just awesome because they're coming in the door and they're getting this education that says, wow, I understand this a little better now. Okay. And then reasonable accommodations for treatment schedules and clinical needs. Every need is going to be different for every individual. Like I said, some people might be a partial program. Some might be, hey, I'm going to go to Recovery Dharma, or I'm going to use my church, or I'm going to use whatever for their recovery. Every recovery pathway is different. And I don't judge anyone's. But having that open-mindedness to say, okay, this is what your need is. How can we help accommodate those needs? Within reason, of course. Somebody says, well, I need 2 months out of the year off. How is that related to recovery? So that may not be feasible, obviously, but most of the time people are very, very open-minded to what are your needs? What can we do to assist you? Okay. Stigma. There's a whole hour on this one, and could be a whole week, actually. So stigma is a standard, the standard dictionary definition is a mark of disgrace connected to a situation or quality of a person. Anybody here experience stigma? I'm going to say everybody, right? Probably everybody. A person who experiences stigma is seen as less than. And being in a field as long as I have, I can tell you that this has decreased, which is great news. It's wonderful news, but it's not gone. I don't know that it ever will be. We did a study. Pro-A was involved in a study, a very, very large study. That's on our website if you ever want to look at it. And it talked about what is the average person in our communities? What is the healthcare individuals? What do they think of people in recovery or people with substance use disorders? And the outcomes were not good. And the outcomes said that the majority of people believed that it was a moral deficiency or that it was a choice. And do I think it's a choice? We'll go into that at the end of this. But for most people, if they haven't had the experience and their culture was, that's bad, people make those bad choices, that's them, how would they change that, So making sure that we have our value system changed is crucial. But again, if I don't recognize that I have some kind of discrimination or stigmatizing language or bias towards someone, I'm not even going to try to look at it. So, of course, it's generally based on assumptions or misconceptions. If I was to ask somebody, what do you think of if I say addict? What might they say? I've heard people say, oh, they'll steal your purse, hide your wallet. I'll hear them go down the list. That's a judgment. Do people need to do certain things to survive their addiction? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean they're bad people. It means that they're doing things to survive an addiction. And if we get to the positive end of this, we recognize hiring people in recovery, they have survived an addiction. So imagine what they're going to bring to the table, as I try to say. So the misconceptions, that is, stigma affects individuals with a substance use disorder, healthcare providers, treatments, research, policies, and society as a whole. Our legislators, our staff members, our hospitals, everywhere in our society, there are people that have judgments against individuals with substance use and mental health disorders. We're trying to take that out of the trades industry altogether, at least start someplace, right? Okay. So ways to reduce stigma, and these are pretty important steps. Educate about substance use. Like I said, individuals often don't know that they have a bias until they start talking about it. I've seen people come in 10 years in recovery and people don't know they have a history of substance use. And, well, you never used. What do you know? What do you know? And they're shocked because they don't understand that this absolutely is a disease that absolutely can be cured. Recovery. Language matters. When I'm speaking to someone in a language, I say, what do you do with your individuals with substance use disorder? That's supportive. If I use something else like addicts, what do you do with addicts, alcoholics even? That's a stigmatizing language. Speak out about substance use stigma. So if I feel like it's going on in my environment, especially in the culture where I'm working, I should speak up. I worked someplace years and years ago, right before, it was a long time ago. I was pretty young. It wasn't the field, but it was something to do with human services. And they had a lot of people that did a lot of stigmatizing language. And that really bothered me because I thought, well, if you're not seeing this as a disease or a disorder, how are you helping them to try to cure, as they would say, or deal with or get into recovery? Educate about the use of medications for substance use. So I've had people come in and say, well, they're using a medication-assisted treatment, so they're still using. They're actually not, unless they're abusing it, But there are medications now. And a real quick story, a gentleman who was about 69, 70 years old, and he could not stop using opiates, could not. Every time he got into recovery, he ended up relapsing within about 2 months. This went on for decades. Finally, he decided to try a medication-assisted treatment. The gentleman lived another 20 years, excelling in almost everything he did in his life because he chose to utilize a medication-assisted treatment. And it will probably tell you about 50 years ago, they may not have had that medication for him, but he did phenomenal. But because of what he thought in his mind, I'm not doing that. That's still using. It's not. It's a medication. So know that if people are placed on medication by a physician, it's an order that's going to help them with this disorder. Really important to know. So listen, but withhold judgment. So if somebody is sharing they're struggling with something, try not to judge them. Let them finish their story. Because a lot of times people start out with, yeah, I'm nothing but, and then all of a sudden you realize they're an average person. They just ran into some hard times, or they have a substance use disorder. Treat everyone with dignity and respect. I love that one. Like, we should do that no matter what, whether it's the president, whether it's the guy who just walked in the door for the first day, whether it's the union, I was going to say the bigwigs at the union, or it's the janitor. It's whoever comes through the hall. Everyone should treat with respect and dignity. Avoid hurting or dehumanizing labels. Hurtful labels. I'm sure you've all heard them. And when we go into the stigmatizing language training, we'll go on into a lot more. But even the words addict or alcoholic or somebody, even something simple as, do you have a clean or dirty urine? Well, if I say I'm clean, that implies that when I was using, I was dirty. And that's a real stigmatizing statement, which people don't recognize. So just think about what we say before we say it, because if I'm saying it to you and outside coming through the hall is a gentleman that has a substance use issue and was going to ask for help, but all of a sudden says, nope, not doing that now, because they're going to judge me. We have to be careful how we say things to people. And of course, demand equality and parity in medical coverage. There's a whole bunch of laws passed and a whole bunch of people that I know, a handful of them, which shows you my age, who actually helped pass a whole lot of laws. And it said that, hey, years ago, there was not drug and alcohol treatment, but now there has to be. Every insurance carrier must have the substance use treatment as well, which is great. So reducing stigma and building a culture supportive of recovery values, leadership modeling. So if you're a leader, I guess most of us are leaders in some way or another, right? No matter what, we want to model and public commitments to recovery supportive values. Let people know that we support recovery. Let people know where we are. Peer support and recovery champions. So Pro-A does a training series, 2 actually. Certified Recovery Specialist, which is the PCB curriculum, and we do the Pennsylvania Addiction Professionals curriculum for peer specialists as well. And they're series that help individuals who have substance use personal experience become a peer worker, which is phenomenal. The end of these series that we're doing for people, we're going to brief you on, if you're interested, excuse me, we can assist in showing individuals in the workplace how to be peer workers. So that's not the training, but you would get the knowledge of what to do next, which is pretty awesome. I know a handful of unions at almost every site. They'll say, hey, if you have any issues, there's a guy in the safety committee. He can tell you all about peer sports. Great. You just gave me an open door. You didn't even know I had recovery or I have substance use issue, and you told me where to go. I love that. And of course, regular communications and recovery activities. Yes, I lose my voice sometimes, so luckily we're coming up. Regular communications would mean really, I'm going to check in on you. How are you doing? I know you were in rehab last month. I'm not going to do it in a room full of people. I'm not going to do it in a hallway. I'm going to do it, again, we want to make sure that we're being confidential with people. But maybe I know something happened. You were gone all last month. You look really good. What's going on for you? And then all of a sudden, I've opened the door for you to have a conversation. So those things are pretty cool. So implementation roadmap, assess your current policies and gaps. There's one thing I always ask people, what do you have in place now for people if they need the help? Secure leadership buy-in and form a cross-functional team. So we can start so let's say I am just, I don't want to say just, but let's say I am I'm a steward, right? Or I'm still an apprentice. I can still open my mouth and have conversations with the people that I'm working with, and that could open the door. But if I'm a leader, imagine the impact I might have if I can change something about my environment. Train supervisors and staff, launch anti-stigma campaigns, especially if you feel stigmatized in your environment. And this 3, update policies to include supportive pathways and EAP linkage. Pilot changes in one unit, collect feedback. So you want to maybe try something over here and see if it works. And if it does, you're going to keep going. And if it doesn't, you try something else. And then monitor the metrics in the scale. So you might find out your productivity suddenly went up 20%. Or you might find out it went down, depending on what your policies are. Doing these things and at least having the conversations, looking over your policies, and we do have one on that too, really talks more about how accepting am I of helping someone in the community or in my work environment that has substance use disorder. So resources and next steps, look at your drug-free workplace policies. Drug-free means what? What does that mean to you? Every organization is different. Drug-free might mean you can never use. Drug-free might mean, well, if you're on a medication-assisted treatment, we have to address that. So you want to look at what the policies are so that you're not going to exclude people, but you also want to have the open-mindedness to say, where could this be a problem? How can I prevent it? So looking ahead and seeing what the barriers might be and then how to address them can be really beneficial. Identify a program lead and a local recovery resources. So we have So many resources. I can't even tell you. The last one we have, I think, one of the is resource hour training. But there's so many resources out there that we don't even recognize. Excuse me. For me, my work environment, the people I work with every single day, those are the people that are going to be the best resources for me. And then scheduled supervised training and an EAP evaluation. So you want to make sure that you have individual supervisors who are aware of the policies, and you want to make sure that you can complete them and know how to reach EAP. And you got a lot of resources too. I forgot about that. Look at that. Questions. I know I talk a lot, sorry. Any questions, even online? I don't know who's online, if anybody.
There's a couple. No questions in the chat.
No questions in the chat? Comments?
Making personally myself aware of all the programs.
Awesome.
I know for a fact that culture has changed.
Awesome.
I come from a long background of construction, and I've been in this trade for over 30 years.
Wow.
And when I first got in it, our bosses were bringing us coolers of beer on the job. I mean, for the men to work.
Yeah.
You know, and we would go out at lunch and have beers.
Yeah.
And, you know, my bosses were like, Marcus, ain't you coming to have beers?
Yeah.
And it was a culture.
Yeah.
Then too, it's
Yeah.
a different culture, but it's still a culture of drinking at work.
Right.
And the times have changed so much.
Awesome.
And I've gotten to, you know, a point where I am a leader. And it didn't happen of my choice. I was needed on a job, and I became a foreman. And you know, next thing you know, I have guys crying to me in the morning, you know, going through things, and I realized that, you know, I can actually help people.
Yep, that's awesome.
And it's so different now, and
Yeah.
I think that I appreciate it more because I'm older.
Yeah.
I was young and dumb at one point, and as you get older and you get wiser, you want to help.
Yeah.
And I'm at the age, you know, I'm going to be 55 next year. I'm at the age where I do. I like to help young men like this gentleman here, and the guy that came into my office crying because he was going through some family issues. You know, I never thought people would be coming to me and balling at work, and you know, just, you know, giving me a heavy load of things. I mean, I just, hey, let's sign in and let's get to work. But you realize
that was
after it happens again and again, that you have a responsibility to be different and create a different type of culture. Yeah. And so this is great, and the awareness is great. And I had changed in my life. I was the guy that had beers every day after work. Yeah. Every day. You know, and it wasn't even at a bar. It was at home. It was my unwind or whatever. And I'm not that way anymore. You know, I still drink beer on occasion socially, you know, but I don't need it every day. And I think the mental health issues kind of go hand in hand with the addiction. Yeah. And that there's court issues that everyone needs to deal with in their lives. Yeah. You know, you kind of, I had to go through a reckoning. What was wrong with my life? Or what was going on with myself that I felt like I needed to have a beer every day? Yeah. Or, you know, do some type of self-medicating to make me feel better. And it makes you want to address those issues. And having a culture available to, and like you said, a safety network of people that you can talk to and communicate with, just helps you change. Yeah. So I'm grateful to have a program here, and you know, and I hope this, you know, other people can take advantage of this.
Yeah. So. I can't thank you enough for two reasons. Number one, for sharing that with us here. That's number one, because a lot of people are a little bit guarded. And you're right, the culture is so different from years ago. Mm-hmm. And you can probably look back and see how unhealthy that was for you. Not wrong, not good, not bad. No, there's no, you know, good or bad. It's about the healthy and unhealthy. and the things that can change. But so for the first thing, trusting us with what you just shared, and the second thing, for being part of the solution, for being that guy that lets people come in and you have that ear. Like, to me, that's tremendous. There's I can hear humility in your voice. I hear positive hopefulness, as opposed to, oh, I have somebody else who's using, like that's what people need, that support. So thank you on both counts for that. That's tremendous.
Sorry.
No,
my daughters as well. I mean, I've had some. I think in my home family I've had some mental health issues where I've had so many different people in my family try to commit suicide, and at some point we all have to take ownership of that, not just that individual person and say, hey, fix your life up, but what can we do to help you? And I learned that, unfortunately, with my daughters, the two people I cared the deepest for in my entire life. And I mean, we're still not altogether perfect. We all have issues and things like that, but I had to be the type of father that stopped, thinking he was going to yell his problems away or scold my kids into learning something. And let's talk. Let's talk. It was not how I was saying it, but what I was saying. And so I'm just grateful that there's programs like this. And even if I wish there was a bigger turnout, that, I'm benefiting from it. So this is not a waste of time. Yeah.
I would appreciate what you're saying. And I think the cultural shift that I see that this is an example of, and what you just shared, is the culture of being able to speak of it, right? And so regardless of what it is that we are, if we're talking about, mental health, if we're talking about recovery, if we're talking about, recommending an EAP, whatever it, even just the talking about it and, continuing to shine a light a little bit and creating a common language and a little bit of comfort, because these are also often, even with your daughters and, with family members, it is an uncomfortable conversation, certainly with coworkers, but the more practice we have with just speaking about it, and again, whether we're talking about substance use, mental health, the terrible thing that happened to you on the way to work, whatever it is, just that cultural shift in being comfortable to bring a little bit of yourself to work, and what does that mean, and talking through some of that cultural shift, I think is really significant, and keeps people safer, it keeps people healthier, and improves all the things that we're looking for. So yeah.
And I think this is still young too. This is in its conception, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe 10 years from now, this room will be full. Because people aren't really, the mental health stigmas and the drug addiction stigmas, they're still there. And the more people can have resources like this, or the resources at work, or be able to, have the courage to share. And, it wasn't always comfortable for me to share, but I can now, and as my family or, members that I am close to heal, we all heal together. So,
The changing culture. It's not here.
Absolutely.
Put in your home, in your community. I
And
mean,
you
to
got
me,
two
that's
different generations.
Yeah.
Like a young man here. We can't tell. Knock it off. But no, this is, like I said, this is hopefully, maybe he'll be here one day with some younger leadership, and this can be, a forum, and it's just, this is the start of something.
I thought about that too when especially before we started, and Sammy said number 2, the boys on the way, and I thought back, I was looking at myself internally. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was me like almost 10-15 years ago, and it almost made me change internally, because it was like you said, talking to your kids is important, teaching them, telling them all that good stuff. That's very, very important. But also number 3 comes along, and I know it was my last child, my last one. And I'm like, how am I as a leader, as a person, how am I presenting how am I representing myself and leading other people? It's like, I was so preoccupied when we first started having our family and first started working. It was just work, 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 make money, go to the bar, get drunk, whatever. It was like work. But then number 3, you're like, oh my gosh, people like look up to me. I'm like, I have kids now, I gotta change the way I operate, change the way I communicate, change the way, not change, just let off a better image, and just kind of, because they're looking at me, my kids are looking at me, Yeah.
See what you do.
Yeah.
And they're like,
Lead by example, and yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. But it wasn't that.
young kids.
Yeah. But it really dawned on me, like, oh my gosh, I need to start leading by example. I tell you the right thing to do, but am I actually doing it,
And it's never too.
Yes.
Some people stay on, okay, learn new tricks. Well, yeah. I'm an old dog improver, so.
I'm an older.
Yeah.
Yes, you are again. I'm older. But your analogy actually, and this younger person coming in, you're that mentor, that person. Whether you realize it or not, people are watching us, and that's obviously not the only reason to change. However, if you're a supervisor, imagine the lives you could impact. You could just have one conversation with someone, or if you leave your door open when they come in, in a struggling way, because you're absolutely right with mental health and substance use. A lot of people use, so just because we don't have substance use disorder doesn't mean they don't have mental health, but I still mean all of it really isn't.
Yeah, it is.
But having that environment, like Jessica was saying, open door, like everyone has a voice here, everyone, and your voice confidentially is even more important. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Thank you for sharing. Anything else?
I thought this was great.
You guys are awesome.
Thank you. Number
Thank
2
you.
rocked. So session 2 rocked. Can't wait for 3 and 4, and this is all good. So.
If you're online, there's a barcode on the last slide.
And I sent the link too. There's a link.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
And for those in the room, I do have barcode. So wait, that's no other questions, comments? You guys are an awesome audience. Thank you. No, thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
Thank you.
All of you.
Session 3, March 25th, and Hauk is going to be hosting that in Livingston.
Awesome. Is that in person?
In person, yes. Well, hybrid again.
I might have to get. We'll be there for wonderful.
And for 4, we are going to, along with Pro-A, we're inviting the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, because we have the annual Hike for Hope is May 16th. And AFSP wants to come and hype it up and make sure people know about it.
Awesome. Awesome. What a great organization and venue that people utilize. Well, I'll be there.
Yes.
Couldn't make it last year. I had a training with that.
So thank you to Pro-A and Patty and her team, and thank you to Jessica and Panoni for hosting us. Patty for the education, Jessica for the hosting, and our friend Marcus for the great inspirational comments, and Sammy, the next generation of leaders.
There you go. That's it. Thank you all. You guys are really great.
Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it.
I'm going to log off, and we'll see you next month.
Yes.